Good evening. It's interesting in the world how for every story there always seems to be a counter story. And, I'm so glad that I found this author on my own. I think tonight is author night. What's going on? And I cannot even find any of his books in the house, but that doesn't matter. We're going to plow along. I think they're just all so beloved that people get magnetized to them and they disappear. But I found him really originally on the streets. In fact, I first read his brother's book, Shiva Naipaul, who was much less famous, much younger, and who died much younger, and then later read V.S. This is V.S. Naipaul, and I'm so glad because I didn't know there was all kinds of political turmoil and this and that and sort of craziness around him. And later I got in, would walk in on embroiled discussions about him and realized, oh my goodness, everyone's missing the point. And, if anyone has seen the film The Rabbit Fence, that's another, sort of film about the downside of colonialism. In that particular movie, it's with Aborigines in Australia. But V.S. was, one of those stories of the person who colonialism really helped. He really felt that it helped his life. He was lucky. He did not have a sort of zealous, weird kind of missionary upbringing like the people who were really traumatized. He was really fortunate. He had a teacher who knew Shakespeare and who knew all the Greeks and who could just sit there and talk about world history. And Naipaul found out, at some point that teacher was really down there in Trinidad, which is where Naipaul was from, for the weather. It was, someone who was sickly, and they were from England, and they were just very bookish and very intellectual. And Naipaul's father was from an illiterate family. They were coconut sellers, and he made very little money selling coconuts. And the father had very terrible stomach problems, and they were exacerbated because he had to live with relatives who were like really mean for him. And in fact, the first book that I read by V.S. Naipaul was this book, A House for Mr. Biswas, which is really deceptive looking. I mean, it's this a wonderful book. And soon after, I read another one called The Mystic Masoor, which was about this guru who lived in Trinidad and how he raised the economy because everybody was flying down there and all the cab drivers were like loving it. And, it was just this wonderful book. And, he wrote about how his father saved all of his money so that he could go to this English school that opened up. And the English school was hugely subsidized, but they needed like a little bit of money, not that much. And I think he ended up getting a scholarship. But this was someone who kind of got, the good end of the colonial stick. I think a lot of people got, the raw end of the deal, but V.S. Naipaul got the good part, and he was able to kind of get out of the extreme poverty that he was born into, and travel the world and have an amazing life. And no one really writes about post-colonialism better than V.S. Naipaul. He's extremely human. He brings everything to this level of reality that's beautiful. It's like he really blows by any kind of pretense of literature. He just has this clear clear way of seeing the world that's just refreshing and quite beautiful. So if people are interested in just, and so it was sad for me to see later, people really hated him and, said he was like a pro-colonialist. And it was just how his life happened to be. He, that school was really the best thing for him. A Bend in the River is just, it's about Africa. It's really incredible. There's one called In a Free State that is fabulous. Miguel Street is sort of an earlier book that is really just paints characters who were there and where he grew up. The Suffrage of Elvira, I cannot remember. I remember reading it. He also wrote, there's the Mystic Masseur, the little guru that everyone loved in their town. There's a really, wow, he wrote about going through the South. He wrote about really the history of Trinidad as well. And, he was rather forgiving to the British. And I think that he got hated for that. But he said the Spanish only wanted gold. They were rather brutal. And that when the British came through, they were able to see the value in other things as well. But he really talked about what a furnace Haiti was, and that we don't really learn very much about Caribbean history because it was so brutal. Haiti was basically where people were just sent to die. If you were sent to Haiti, you weren't probably going to live. So it was a pretty horrible past, but I just remember reading it anyway, just plowing through it. So he's amazing, and I was sorry to see that he was sort of so dissed because he happened to fall into one of these cracks of colonialism doing something good for a person, and a wonderful school that showed up in Port-au-Prince or wherever it was where he was. And he writes these delightful stories about walking to school and this wonderful teacher who was able to really open up history and the world for him. So have a great night, everybody. Thank you.